Greetings, welcome back to Game Design. This is Lesson 19, Collision Detection. Alright, so this is one of the big last pieces of getting your game to work. With this last piece of knowledge, you should be able to have a fairly functioning game. I mean, there's still a little bit more in-depth pieces, complex sprite movement, complex collision pieces, including bounce off, displace, and stuff like that. But for the most part, you now can make it so, hey, if this sprite is touching this sprite, it dies, you score points, whatever. So like in our Pong game we've been working on, and bounce off the paddle. If it touches this, then change its direction. So, and again, eventually we'll learn more things that'll make it even easier. But at this point, you have quite a bit of the knowledge you need to make it do what you need to do. So with that, we're going to jump right in. This is a fairly short lesson, and then we'll kind of see how this code, which is simply just is touching, how it works. All right, so the first piece is we run it, they run into each other, and then the food goes away. Right? But here's the thing, they stopped, right? They stopped. So there's some kind of collision detection going on in that thing. So what was it? How does it work? Well, first things first, let's take a look at this code. All right, let's take a look at this code. And what it wants you to do is look at it, think what's going to happen. Right, look, it's pretty much, this is mostly the code, the robot, the bunny, the dinner, right? It's mostly the same code. So what's going to happen and why? All right, so if I already run mine, so I'm going to pause it, answer it. There's a question at the bottom. And then run it, and you'll see exactly the same. Now, what is going on here? Well, essentially, you're saying, hey, look, here is the X of the bunny, here's X of the robot, right? If they pass each other, however, it is doing this nice little thing where it says the width, right? Because if it was just the X, then they would go past each other. They'd still collide, but they'd go into each other, and then this part of the bunny would be over this part of the robot. They go over. So that's why you see this width, because it's this X plus width, this X plus width, which gives you this nice little thing right here where if they go past each other, so that's why you have the greater than and the less than, right? If they go past each other, then they stop and change the bowl to empty, right? The robot spills the bowl. Guess what? You don't need to know that. That's not how we are going to use it. A lot of programming languages, that is kind of what you do. But again, when you have these gaming things, they built these things in there for you to be able to do that. So in this case, if bunny is touching dinner, right? If the bunny is touching the dinner, then we execute the same code, right? So this is the exact same code that ran through all of this. We just have the if the bunny is touching the dinner. So like in our case, if the ball is touching the left paddle, if the ball is touching the right paddle, then we execute a Q code to make it bounce, right? To make it go the other direction. All right, got a couple more lessons to talk about this, but that's really it, right? You just throw it into the if statement. If the sprites are touching each other, then it works. All right, so another thing to understand is it's while it's touching it, right? So again, it's not like the code just stops itself. So when we run this, it shoots right through. We're going to throw in the if statement real quick and say if it's touching. All right, so we have our if statement. So if the sprite is touching, all right, let's say if Apple is touching Blender, right? If the Apple is touching the Blender, yeah, have fun today. All right, so if the Apple's touching the Blender, then we go ahead and shake it, right? Well, here is the code that's shaking the Blender, right? So I'm just going to drag this into the if statement, and now only if the Apple's touching the Blender is that going to shake. So, and here's a great example. It's shaking, it's shaking, it's shaking, it's shaking, and then it stops shaking. Now you can kind of see the apple in the background of it one more time. You can kind of see it coming through right here. There's a piece of the apple and shoot at the bottom. So this is important to understand. Again, if you wanted this to reset or something, or you're having score, and we'll see actually when you do project for lesson 20, right, as an object's touching it, you can have the health points go down. And that maybe is a feature, or maybe you don't want that, right? If you only have 4 health points, right, you're going to die really quickly if it's while it's touching it. So a lot of times you think about it is it hits it and you reset it to where it needs to go, right? So as you go through, we'll explain that more, but essentially we know that it's touching. In this case, we're shaking it, but we could also reset the apple here. Apple's x or y equals 0, add a score, whatever you're trying to do. The point is, this piece right here is it touching it, and then you need to figure out what you put inside of it, depending on what your game or whatever you're trying to do is, right? So one more, and then we'll go ahead and let you work on the practice, the assessment, and the challenges. All right, so in this case, this is a very, very important one, and I've been mentioning this over and over again as we've gone through these lessons. But let's go ahead and run this real quick, and hopefully you have as well. And you notice when you use the arrows to move you can see the attack moving. Whoa, it popped way far away from where the balloon was, right? It popped way over here. So there's this debug feature, and again, you are going to need to do this because pretty much really what you're going to do for most of this, right? So if I change this to true, reset it again, notice that green square. You might not see it super well, but as I move the cursor, you can see it's going to pop when I touch that. Boop, there it goes, right? So, mentioned this before, this, and again, it might be hard to see, but this gray area around here, that's part of the sprite, right? So when it touches up here, it's going to pop, right? Pop. So here's a nice little feature. You click this, and it goes down. Now, again, technically still it'll pop here, but when we run this, at least it's going to work a lot better, right? It's at least a lot closer to it. And as we go through, you're going to see that we have the ability to change the collider, right? It doesn't give us the code to do it yet, but it is important. And I'm actually going to go ahead and this should hopefully help you with the rest of them. But look, you can see how you can angle it and change it. I'm going to talk a little bit about it, so I'm going to click on this collider, because now it's actually going to give me the code that we need. But if we go over to sprites, you'll see there's the set collider. By the time you get here, you'll have already had to make it circle. Circle is the easiest one. But you can click on examples, and then you can go through, and you can see that it takes a bunch of different things, right? And you can see in this example, it's XY, which is this offset, right? So I can move this off to the side. And then 2080 is the width and how long it is, right? And then the 45 is why it's tilted, right? So if it was 0, it would just be a rectangle this way, but it's tilted, and now you can say this is the sprite, right? So there's a lot to it. There's a lot less with the circle. Because it is a circle, so there's no angle. There is the offset, but then it's just the radius, right? So you don't have these last two. So you can make things work fairly well for you, right? You see I already have the code done for here. We just guesstimate the pieces of it, and this is not perfect, right? I should make it less. And this here, let me show you this, because I think a lot of people really struggled with, they put numbers there. Well, see, that's what offset does, right? Over 20, down 20, right? Because it's plus, and you can do negative as well, right? So over 20, over 20, up 20. So that's the 0, 0, over 20, up 20, because minus, right? So again, that's kind of how you do this, and you can really narrow that down to what you're trying to do if you just take the time to be like, all right, maybe this is 35. All right, that gives a slider. Maybe I want a little bit longer. Let's go 70. Right. And again, you're never gonna have it perfect. Maybe you just gotta kind of figure out what you're willing to take as a good enough example, right? Maybe that looks good enough for me. 30 is the right angle. So anyway, I'll give you that little hint there. That should kind of help you as you're going through the practice. But also when you're doing your game, if you have tilted things or circular things, right? One of the first practices is making it so these things actually fully collide instead of colliding off on the sides. So again, just making sure that you have the things right. So circle collider makes them go. If they don't have the circle collider, then you have that square, and then it hits the square, right? Anyway, that's all I have for this lesson. We'll see you next lesson.